Good evening, Valeriy Viktorovich.
Good evening.
Good evening, dear viewers, radio listeners and guests in the studio. Today is December the 2nd, 2019. Let's begin with an event, or to be more precise, a statement, which is nowadays widely discussed, made by the French ex-president Nicolas Sarkozy, who claimed the following: if someone thinks that the problem is only with political parties, then he overlooks the decline of Europe, the decline of the West. For centuries, Axis Mundi passed through the West. Today it shifted to the East. Of the 7 billion people living on Earth, 4 billion live in Asia, and in the center only 800 million. We are no longer the axis of the world, and there are demographic reasons for this. Give your comments on the statement, please.
In principle, the statement is quite serious and informative, and it touches the transfer of the governance concentration center from Europe, Great Britain and the USA to Asia, China and Iran. That is what we kept telling about. We are continually questioned, where did you see this, and all that. That is, they see no transfer of industry, technological zones there, which raises the question of their level of understanding. When they see no transfer of governance concentration centers through the credit and financial system, it also raises the question: don't they see the growth of states, of their influence in their increase in superstate activity? China, which was not considered a state in the beginning of the 20th century, nowadays, in the beginning of the 21st century, it conducts an active, expansive policy, creates military bases abroad, carries out infrastructure projects of exploring Latin America and Africa. Trans-African Railway alone says a lot, and a pile of other things. In fact, that is a certain progress of the state, its redesign, change of some relationships in the world. How does an average person orient himself? If there was an official announcement, a ticket was issued, then this process exists. Otherwise, for instance, as in the case of ISIS, there was a lot of information that ISIS is an irregular army of the United States. We talked about it. But until the official statement appeared, that became possible because the air was full of such information. All average persons, so-called analytics, who demanded the proofs, issue as a ticket, could not come to the conclusion themselves based on what they see. They need to see official statements. As Kозьма Prutkov wrote, if a sign plate on the cell with buffalo says elephant, do not trust your eyes. But not to trust one's eyes? Where is the truth? What should come first, the sign plate or the animal? As to such analytics, sign plate always comes first. Now, then, any project of global level, including transfer of governance concentration center, follows the Overton window principle. The bigger the project, the longer are the cycles of this single complex of the Overton window. In particular, for example, the project preparation cycle, when the idea to be introduced in society seems unthinkable, but it happens here and there. But what do we see now? We see a transition stage in the current situation. We are told, what is Sarkozy? A little president. He failed here, he failed there, and things like that. But the point is that staff shortage is awful both in our country and in the West. One way or another, the same political deck is shuffled. Once in the deck, it is quite hard to fall out the deck. One can be thrown out of, but it is very difficult to fall out by himself. In this situation, Sarkozy, gradually following the GP plans to redraw Europe, for which cause he is considered by some people an unsuccessful president, stays in the deck anyway. At the same time, he failed some tasks and therefore became a whipping boy politician for the correction purposes, because in this case global predictor gives preference to truncation of the elites as a governance maneuver in order to improve the quality of governance. For correction purposes, there is always a politician found who gets an endless horror, not a horrible end, but an endless horror, to make others watch him and wish to avoid such destiny for themselves, so that they acted as they should. That is one is exemplified to teach the rest of the political elites, and Sarkozy was such an example over a long time. And due to the fact, exactly this fact, that he is marginal to some extent, but at the same time he is in the deck of the global elite, not of global predictor, but of the elite that is used as a tool to conduct global policy. He and Macron are entrusted to conduct the beginning of a new phase of the Overton window, when an unthinkable idea becomes an idea of discussion, which starts in media with "let's talk on that, it is so or not." In other words, it is posing a discussion question, and this is done efficiently at high quality. Therefore, to disregard this, saying that Sarkozy is nobody, means to see no process where people are getting prepared for the ongoing transfer of governance concentration centers. As to the question formulation, in the form as Sarkozy expressed, that Axis Mundi always passed through the West, and now the West has less people than Asia, but before it used to have more. When did it happen that the West had a bigger population? In the 19th century, China practically filled Europe with cheap goods. China had a bigger economy, and the population of Asia was bigger. And the world colonial system was established based on a strategy when small squads of white colonizers came to huge countries inhabited by other nations, for example, as Great Britain came to India and ruled it. The British military power, about 2 divisions, was not enough to control by force the country, multiple superior in population to the metropole, and yet it governed India. Why? And here we again return to the analytical note: state is a system of nation survival. What does a country need to be held as a state? China lost its expansion into the world only because it did not have a globalization target. Hence, China didn't act at the level of global policy. It didn't work in foreign policy area. China shut itself off from the rest of the world to run only domestic policy. Thus, in the middle of the 19th century, China was unpacked and turned into a resource appendage. But it all was done on purpose. In principle, the history of China is very interesting in this regard. China shut itself off in order to be, at the end of the day, unpacked by the West in the exact way as it happened. The West was a subject conducting global policy. The Western states, in this regard, were more capable than those states they came to, because the Western states brought higher technological and societal organization of state. Therefore, a small white squad of colonizers came to any country, whether they are in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and by showing to the existing elite new ways to save their power, colonizers actually reformatted the state as they liked. However, they preserved for themselves the competencies that were crucial for the state to maintain the necessary level. And therefore, what the states turned into when the colonization system fell and all the colonizers left, well, then domestic staff came into power. But were they capable to maintain the state activity at the same level? No. The domestic culture doesn't cover it. They didn't make the leap during the colonization period. They didn't master the competencies crucial for sustainable existence of their national state. Such an experiment of passing the competencies the globalists carried out only in one country, in Russia, when creation of new states was worked out deliberately on the example of Finland. But it failed. Finland has never been a sovereign state, and it is still not sovereign. Being a geopolitical point and being under the direct control of global predictor, at the same time, it still depends economically on Russia to the full. Finland is not capable economically without Russia. It cannot exist as a state, and it would fall. Another thing is that Russia itself is under external control in many aspects. Well, by destroying the state, the Russian interim government actually set the stage to create new states following the example of Romanov's house practice, when Finland was prepared to become a sovereign state over a period of 100 years. There was the governance process practiced to create a more or less sovereign states with the technologies providing the state existence in the technological world. It didn't work out. The conception is not suitable. The only suitable way is given in the Russian world, in Russia. The nations who accepted the way perform a technological leap, technological in terms of social governance, preserving their national culture and giving an opportunity to have any professional-oriented or social-oriented career growth to every single member in their society. We stepped outside a bit, exactly due to the fact that Europe and Great Britain with the United States were the governance concentration centers. Their expansion into the rest of the world resulted in the formation of the colonial world that couldn't resist to higher quality of governance, which was built on a new social and technological base. Hence, China and other states couldn't withstand it, regardless of how much their population was. Thus, the explanation of the current location of the governance concentration center, which is nowadays formed in the East only due to higher population, is actually to mislead people. But this is exactly what is needed for the Overton's windows, disguising the transfer process of the governance concentration center from Europe, Great Britain and the United States to China and Iran. This work is ongoing, but one should understand this clearly. What should be clearly seen here? The one who sees the global trends in due time, whether it is a transnational company, a state. The leaders who first see these processes, which they cannot withstand, and put them to proper use, can win more for themselves, for their states and their nations. Why is that so? Because when a man doesn't know what harbor he is sailing, no wind is a tailwind. But when a man knows the harbor, he can go even against the wind, as sailing ships do tug and tug. In this regard, one should define the governance processes of global scale and use them to achieve his state-oriented, national, clannish, corporative goals. Is our analytical in-crowd capable of providing that? All the political talk shows, analytical materials, and others demonstrate that they are not capable. We have no analytics who understand these processes from a comprehensive perspective. And taking that into account, what governance can be provided? People have nothing left but to master governance knowledge themselves, to create massive statistics of behavior, which one way or another will support the activity of our Государь Vladimir Putin and the interests of the whole Russian state, Russia. By Russia, I mean Big Russia, including the nowadays souvenir republics. And here is a small side note in this regard. The Bolsheviks saw this global policy clearly. We talked a lot on the system of state flags. And what did the Bolsheviks do? They created their own conceptual lineup of flags based on Russian red flag. And we need to come to that point in the future as well. Not a single souvenir republic preserving its current kind of a national flag can either acquire a national state or have a happy life under such a flag. That is why it is necessary to come back to the flags designed by the Bolsheviks in the Soviet Union.